Hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, and I thank you for joining us this afternoon. So, over the past several months, I've seen a growing issue among constituents that I serve. Those who rely on H-4 visas, many of them women, unable to secure the documentation necessary to work. This issue is a reminder of the need for comprehensive immigration reform. But the fact that it affects so many women of color, many with families who are now isolated from opportunities outside of their home, is especially concerning. I have heard from constituents who are frontline workers in this pandemic, who are researchers and medical professionals, who would all be important contributors to our New Jersey economy, and yet they are stuck because the Trump administration changed the way these documents are processed, creating months-long backlog. As we get closer to having President-elect Joe Biden in the White House, we have the potential to get this solved quickly and efficiently. And today I sent a letter that was signed by over 60 members of the House of Representatives asking President-elect Biden to unilaterally extend the expiration of these work documents, therefore allowing these women to keep their jobs. That letter also asks that the incoming administration work quickly to provide a lasting solution to this issue. Today, to dive into directly exactly what's happening and what's at stake, I am thrilled to be joined by Manur Hussain, who's a Policy and Partnerships Manager with South Asian Americans Leading Together, or SALT, and Nisha Kamani, a lawyer at the firm of Antonio and Cohen. Welcome to both of you. So I want to jump. Thank you. I want to jump straight into our questions for my guests, but before I do, I want to flag that if you are watching this live and you have a question, please drop it into the comment section on Facebook, and we'll do our best to get to it before we wrap up. With that said, let's get going. We work in a world with a lot of acronyms and alphabet soup. So let's get one thing clear. What is an H-4 visa? Nisha, can you take us into this one?
Certainly, and thank you so much, Congressman Watson Coleman, for having this event and addressing this issue, something I see daily. As far as the H-4 visa, it is given to the spouse and children of an H-1B visa holder. And what an H-1B visa holder is, a temporary work permit. And it's given for professional positions such as physicians, engineers, teachers, doctors, scientists. And so these are sponsored by an employer, and the H-4s are their dependent spouses and children.
So we know that the folks who rely on these are by and large women of color, many of them well-educated and valuable assets for our local community and our economy. In fact, up to this point, they've been working here and doing just that, contributing to our local economy. What do people need to understand about where the problem started and why it's so bad? I'd like to give that to Manur to respond, if you would.
Yes, thank you so much, Congresswoman, for your leadership and your commitment to our communities and to H-4 recipients. You know, as the leading national South Asian civil rights organization, SALT has been, you know, hoping to advocate alongside H-4 recipients and coalition partners, even before 2015. I'm also an former H-4 dependent, so this is very personal to me. In order to answer your question, Congresswoman, I want to sort of begin by grounding us in sort of the historical framework of how the H-4 EAD was even achieved. So in 2015, after several years of advocacy by community members and coalition leaders, including many South Asian women's organizations, the Department of Homeland Security issued a rule that allowed certain H-4 dependent spouses of H-1B visa holders, like Nisha mentioned, to legally seek employment in the US. Note that this is just certain H-4 dependent spouses. So many H-4 visa holders still remain ineligible for work authorization, and obviously leaving them out of work. And, this can be a very demeaning, demoralizing experience, to not have the financial or economic autonomy to be able to support yourself, your family, and your community. So since 2017, there are over 90,000 H-4 visa holders who have been approved for EAD, so work authorization. 95% of them are women, and at least 98% are from Asian countries, with the vast majority being from China and India. And of course, there's others as well, folks from Nepal, Sri Lanka, South Korea, Pakistan, and others. In December of 2017, the Department of Homeland Security, under the Trump administration, announced that it would seek to revoke the employment authorization from these certain H-4 visa holders. This threat is part and parcel of the Trump administration's series of vicious attacks against immigrant workers, against immigrant women, and is exactly in line with particularly the executive order to Buy American, Hire American. And obviously, over the past several years since 2017, directly impacted community members and advocates have really been trying to successfully delay this rescission. But more recently, we've been hearing that H-4 EAD recipients are, in filing their renewals, have experienced significant delays. And this is largely a part of, again, this attack on immigrant communities, but also before March 2019, the USCIS would adjudicate H-4 petitions and H-4 EAD applications through premium processing. And that would be alongside their H-1B spouse. And that would be as a courtesy, of course. But this has completely changed with the new biometric requirement for H-4 recipients. So the wait times for H-4 EAD holders to be able to renew their work authorization has grown from the usual 3 months to now up to 18 months in some locations. And I'm sure that Nisha can also attest to these long wait times. Overall, we know that the immigration system is intentionally ineffective by design, and really leaves women who are on H-4 really vulnerable to exploitation, to abuse, and overall limits their freedom to work and to move as they wish.
And negatively impacts their families as well. You're absolutely right. And Nisha, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think all of that is correct, and that's what I'm seeing on the ground. The other thing I would mention is that there's also a spillover effect into the businesses and the employers. So I speak to a lot of employers who have an employee who's working on their H-4 work permit, and because it's not renewed in a timely manner, they can't continue to employ that person. And during COVID, losing a key person on your team is really difficult for a business, especially small and medium-sized businesses. So I guess what I would also point out is it's not just one thing that has caused a problem for your constituents in H-4 status. It's sort of an onslaught of what Manur mentioned with used to, as a courtesy, immigration would adjudicate the case of the whole family together. So if the case was expedited, paying additional money to the government for a quicker adjudication, the family would be processed together, and they were separated. So that created an issue. Then there was an issue of these lengthy backlogs, which almost basically gets rid of the benefit. The other thing that I'm seeing is it's really something to keep in mind is the very limited number of folks who will qualify for the H-4 work permit to begin with. And they're the folks who are already in line for their green cards. And so if you're born in China or India especially, your wait time for your green card, if your employer has filed for you, is decades. And so this is not a newly arrived family. This is folks who have been in the US for many years, often 10 plus years. They've got deep roots in the community, and their children are in school here. And so when this work authorization was provided to ameliorate some of the harshness of these long waits, it was really demoralizing to have it taken away, essentially. And so that's what I see a lot, is that not only, I really needed and was given this work permit, and I got out of the house. I didn't feel isolated. I was contributing to my family and community. I was using my diploma that I had earned and progressed in my career, but it feels like a very unfair way, and not a lawful or humane way to take away this benefit.
So you basically answered what was going to be my next question. Like, what are the kinds of things that you're actually hearing from your clients and those that you work with? And so if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, and I'd like to hear from you on that as well, Manur.
Sure, I'll continue, and then I'll hand over to Manur. So what I'm seeing on the ground are people losing their jobs, people having interruptions in their jobs, an emotional toll, the negative impact that I mentioned. I think that a lot of what folks are facing is just big career setbacks. And, we talked about this largely affecting women and women of color, but already during COVID, a lot of women's careers have already been negatively impacted because of schools being closed and caregiving roles. And so this is what I see as a real frustration. In addition, because COVID has posed financial challenges for families, that income from the H-4 holder is often really critical to paying bills and keeping everything together. So I would mention that's something I'm seeing a lot too.
Manur, do you have anything you'd like to contribute to that?
Yeah, and I think just really emphasizing that detrimental sort of mental health impact. Especially during the pandemic, folks are having to stay at home without meaningful unemployment. It's already so difficult to maintain a household on a single income, or a dual income, let alone a single income. And so we are seeing that folks are experiencing increased abuse while being in close proximity with their abusers, or unable to leave these abusive situations because they are, unable to have that economic freedom. I actually wanted to read something that we received at SALT from a person who lost their employment as a result of these delays. She said, it makes immigrants like me feel unwanted and unwelcome, and I wonder if I should even be staying in this country for longer, when at every single step I get the feeling that the government does not want me here. There is no reason for my visas not to get approved, as there cannot be any more information that the immigration department would require from me. My application is tied to my husband, and if his visa is approved, then there is no reason for mine to be taking so long. I feel this delay has been intentional by the government. So we're really seeing the impact that this has on families, especially folks who are just feeling extreme stress during this time.
Well, we know that the isolation that people are feeling through this pandemic and the impact that it's had on their employability, and the Senate's refusal to support us in more COVID relief packages is really taking its toll on families, and even families that were in pretty good stead are now finding themselves in very vulnerable positions and very unsure of what's going to happen with them, insecurity in housing and food and income and all of those things. And so hopefully good news is on the way. We may have a little bit longer to wait, but even to the woman, the person that wrote you that letter, we pray that you just hang in there just a little while longer. I think that this is a new administration that's coming in, and I believe that it respects our immigration policies that need to be reformed, and it respects immigrants coming and contributing to the well-being of our country. Originally, I had hoped to have one of the constituents, someone like who you just read the letter from, who would be willing to work with us today and to be a part of this. But I think that we were told that some people expressed concern that being public might have a negative consequence on them, because we know that it's been a part of the culture of the Trump administration to just intentionally create a world of fear among our immigrant community. And so I certainly would like to hear from you about why it's so problematic on this issue and across the board, because we need to hear these firsthand accounts so that we can use that information as we're moving forth and looking for solutions and approaches. So I wonder if you had anything you'd like to add to that, Mahnur.
Yeah, thank you, Congresswoman. So I think what's obviously critical, again, as we've all named, is that undocumented immigrants, asylum seekers, DACA and TPS recipients, and all immigrant workers, including H-4 EAD recipients, have been experiencing this ongoing threat, right? So the Trump administration on day one, launched the Muslim ban, the African asylum bans, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and the Trump administration issued 3 different executive orders to limit people on H-1B and J-1 visas and other work visas. So there's been an ongoing threat to deport, disenfranchise, and depopulate communities of color, and the fear is rightfully justified. We've also seen a rise in xenophobic hate violence against our communities. Just between November 2015 and November 2020, SALT has recorded 348 incidents of xenophobic rhetoric coming from officials in the White House, as well as 733 incidents of hate violence targeting South Asians, Muslims, Hindus, and those who are racialized as Muslims. And these incidents of hate violence don't occur in a vacuum, right? Xenophobic and racist policies from the highest levels of government create sort of this fertile ground for interpersonal hate violence and this fear that people are feeling not to come out and share their stories. I would encourage folks to really take this opportunity to strengthen their resolve if they feel safe to support communities of color and to really engage locally, write their congressional members, and participate in digital campaigns to really demand for a more humane and just immigration system that we all deserve.
Thank you. Nisha, do you have something you'd like to sort of add to this?
I would just add as what you were referencing in the beginning, Congresswoman, about returning to a dignified system. In the last 4 years, there are a lot of pain points and difficulties, but just trying to move towards a system that's fair and humane and also smart needs to be updated. We need to be looking at how we can positively impact our community through our immigration system. And so I'm not surprised that a lot of constituents weren't willing to or weren't feeling safe in coming forward. Remember, a lot of folks are coming from countries where it's actually dangerous or unwise to openly criticize the government. Hopefully returning to a democratic process where we can, exercise our rights to speak our voice and talk about what we're going through. But I think essentially just moving towards, there are so many issues with immigration that we've gone through. As immigration lawyers, we kind of talk about having a secondary trauma in a way. Everything has been a fight. Everything has been difficult. We just want a humane and fair process. And that's obviously there are a lot of ways to accomplish that.
The immigration communities are not the only communities that have suffered these sort of indignities under the Trump administration. There's a lot of healing that has to take place in our country, and we're going to have to do a lot of work and work together to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. But the trauma that we've experienced over the last 4 years, we have no idea how lasting that trauma is going to be, but we have to actively work together to remind people that you're living in the land of the free and that we should be free to be able to express our concerns, to be able to work where we want to work, to live where we want to live, and to say the things that we need to say. And, we've just seen so much over the last several months in particular, where it has been encouraged to be even more disrespectful and more disregarding of the safety and security of those who don't look like other people. And so we've got a lot of work to do, and I look forward to being a part of that. I just want to remind anyone that is listening, that if you have a question, make sure to ask it in the comments so that we can try to answer it before we shut down our panel discussion. Another question that has sort of been brought to my attention by our office. One of the most frustrating things about all of this, and one of the reasons that I decided to lead this letter to the incoming Biden administration, is the fact that my office has been really powerless to help these folks, because it's not just an issue of qualifying or navigating the process, it's an issue of a new and completely unnecessary backlog. And it's been very, very, very hurtful, because I've got an office that just hardworking individuals that want to be helpful to our constituents and definitely want to stand in the gap for them when the system is working negatively and unfairly against them. Can you explain the impact of this backlog in comparison to what folks may normally think of when it comes to immigration under normal circumstances? If we could ever reach that normalcy again. Let me shoot this over to you, Nisha, first, and then Manor, feel free to add on.
Yes, so in the normal process, you could plan and advise your clients that, make sure you file your renewals on time, make sure, you basically the things that are in your control, as long as you handle those, then you usually will have smooth processing. You will get a receipt notice, you can track it online, and you can kind of depend on, historic processing times, things like that. What folks are facing now is it's really hard to predict or understand when things will happen, whether they'll even happen at all. And it's, again, the consequences of that are people losing their jobs, businesses being harmed, folks being, all the negative consequences that we talked about. So it becomes very unpredictable and hard to plan your life.
I can understand that. Manor, would you like to speak to that at all? If not, we'll go on to the next.
Yeah, I just think that it's clear that both the current immigration and employment-based backlogs are completely unnecessary. There's 4.4 million people who are in the family reunification system, hundreds of thousands more in the employment backlog. And I think we'll go into this in the next question, but the remedy is just to actually add more green cards and to lift the country caps and exempt derivative beneficiaries. So this is all very easily remedied. There's a lot more advocacy that needs to be done on this.
So what are you hearing from individuals that are actually caught up in these delays? How are they living their lives right now? What are they experiencing? What are they doing? I understand, make sure your paperwork is in order, but beyond that, you don't have much control of what's going to happen in the system. So what is it that you're hearing that the way that they're dealing with this during this waiting period?
So what I'm seeing is folks are just asking their employers to, hold their job for them as long as possible. And then they contact the lawyer, and then the lawyer tries to give an estimate. Okay, I think it might be 90 days or 6 months, but they can't work. And so folks are just on hold, trying to wait it out at home. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the employer has to fill that position. We're seeing really folks using their voice and contacting representatives and senators and trying to push for change. A lot of the folks affected, though, are not folks who can vote. So they have to speak to their family and coworkers and community members about what's going on. But what I'm seeing is people are they're losing their jobs, so therefore they're not getting paid. A lot of the folks, as Manor mentioned, are in industries where the impact to our country is really great as well, not just to the immigrants and their businesses themselves, but folks on the front lines of COVID, scientists, folks working in nursing, folks working in technology. And one thing I would mention is the people in line for their green cards, there's already been a test of the labor market to make sure that giving this family a green card will not hurt U.S. workers. So I completely respect and understand the concerns about wanting to protect U.S. workers and the economy. But I think what's happening is that there's sort of a nonsensical delay, and it's really creating turmoil. And I have seen families leave the country that I think most people would want to stay here. I'm seeing the brain drain to Canada, back home to India, to other countries. Can't tell you how many folks are talking about going to Australia and Canada now that we would really want to keep here. They're folks, again, who've had roots and have been here for years. Their children are in school here. And so it's really sad, but I am seeing, a lot of women saying, I can't keep my career on hold another X amount of years. I already did it for 10 years,
Is it resulting in family separation where the spouse who can't get the H-4 visa is actually leaving the spouse that's here working temporarily? Is it breaking up families too?
I have seen a couple of incidents where the family has gone, the dependent spouse and child have gone home because there's the additional issue that we spoke about schools being closed, so needing a caregiver and then not being able to afford childcare. Or so I have seen the H-1B holder stay here while the H-4 holder and the children go back home until this is resolved. So that's also troubling as well. But for a lot of folks, I think they're just, I'm frankly holding on for President-elect Biden to help. And I keep telling my clients, okay, it's almost January 22nd. And I know that President-elect Biden has a lot of things to address, but this is definitely something that folks are waiting in the wings for.
Well, we certainly thought so. I mean, one of the most important questions is, though, how do we fix this? Now, my letter is sort of, here's the stopgap. Let's just unilaterally extend for the current H-4 holders. But that's just a means of dealing with what's happening now and stemming the issues that women and families are facing right now. What does a permanent solution look like? And I want to start with you, Nisha, and follow up with you, Manor.
Certainly. So
let's really think here. What would be the ideal permanent solution?
So there are a lot of challenges with immigration, and generally what we speak to is what will help is comprehensive immigration reform. So not just putting Band-Aids on the different issues, but systematic changes so that things are smart, but also follow a humane process. So I'm going to give practical tips that I think, having done this 20 years, what I see. The per country caps and the caps on the green cards for family, but for the H-4 situation, we're talking about the employment backlogs, is a huge problem. And it's really the underlying issue that is it's a symptom of these processing delays. So being able to address the backlogs and also the per country backlog. So currently the system is set up that only 7% in each green card category can go to a particular country. And what's happened is the large countries like China and India therefore have a very long delay. And so addressing that, and also in a way that doesn't negatively impact other folks in line. The country backlog issue would solve a lot of things. The other practical issue that I would tell you is what I see with children in this situation is I see folks aging out of their family's employment green card process. So if you're 11 years old when your mom or dad filed for their employment green card, you might not be kept together with your family, and your family might get their green cards and you may not. And this is a very real and serious issue I see all the time. And so helping age outs for children would be incredibly important. Another practical tip is, we talked about earlier as a courtesy, the family would be processed together. We keep the family together in their visa processing. If that were to happen, a lot of these issues would be immediately resolved. I just want to, auto extensions for renewals is another. So in some work permit categories, if you file your application on time, you automatically get a 180-day extension of your work authorization while you wait for the renewal. So it gives you some cushion there. That's not the case with the H-4 EAD. They weren't given that auto renewal. So those are a few of the things, but I would like to reiterate that there's so many immigration issues. There's so many as far as folks with DACA, with TPS, with the backlogs, and I think the focus to give the dignity and humanity back into the process would be to look at the entire situation and also use credible sources of information to make those decisions, to make the system smart and updated, keep us safe, keep our economy strong, but also, as you mentioned, Congresswoman, just treating people with basic decency. Immigration lawyers don't want everybody just to get approved for everything or open borders. What we would like is that people are treated as human beings, and that's something that you mentioned, that a lot of folks in different areas, not just immigration issues, just treating people in a decent, humane way. And so I think, again, comprehensive immigration reform is essential.
Thank you. Thank you. Manur, would you like to
just
add?
echoing everything that Nisha said. I think all of those suggestions are spot on. Again, at SALT, we firmly support a labor migration model that respects and prioritizes human rights of workers and their families, and elevating sort of labor standards, not just for South Asian American workers, but all workers. And so currently the policies are fundamentally inequitable. And so we are really hoping that the next administration will take on these changes and really seek permanent solutions for these issues that have been ongoing.
Before I hand it over to Mike to navigate some of the questions that may be from the viewers, a constituent did ask a specific question about Rick Scott's amendment to the Senate version of HR 1044 that puts a cap on the total number of H-1B visas that may receive green cards each year. Have you all taken a position on that, and would you like to share something about from regarding that amendment?
I take a look at the amendment, and I think, again, it's looking, I think there's a tendency to, whenever you do an immigration fix, to do a restriction to balance it out. And I'm not sure that's the right way to go, because think about this in terms of COVID. We want to think there's so many foreign-born physicians who are on the front lines of addressing this, and a lot of them have H-1B visas. And so we really need to be smart at not just, putting up barriers or bans, but only when it's really necessary and really serves an interest. And that's where I would mention looking at credible data on, where, if there is a barrier being put up, being really intentional about what it does and who it affects. I personally, as a private immigration attorney, I would have a hard time with some of our clients. The employers would actually waste a lot of resources if that were the case. And it wouldn't actually mean that the person would leave the country or that job would be handed over to a U.S. citizen. What it would mean is the employer just renews their visa longer. So I don't see how it really adds a benefit.
Thank you. We had supported the original version of the bill, and we were looking at the amendment. And so it's very timely that you should be sharing this with us. We probably would have come to that conclusion as well. It's not about shrinking. It's about just doing the right thing and what makes sense for our economy, this country, and what we stand for, So I want to make sure that we can set aside a few minutes to see if there are any questions from those who are watching. Mike Shanahan is on here to help us do that. And so kind of want to throw it to him to see if there are any questions in the queue.
I can see the question here. Should I read that, Congresswoman?
Yeah, because I can't see any. I can only see that one question.
So this question says there is a 9-month plus delay in H-4 EAD approvals due to the biometrics. Can USCIS reuse old biometrics records? Yes, they can actually. So sometimes my clients get a letter stating that we will be reusing your old biometrics. So I think this biometrics being used as an excuse is exactly that. I think it's an excuse.
Do you see any other questions in the queue? How about the Fixing the Mandatory Victim Restitution Act? A lifelong restitution is not a second chance?
Oh, I'm not familiar with that act.
Yeah, I'm sorry, me either.
Yeah, I'm not either, not offhand. But we will follow up on that one because that seems like a very good question that may even be broader than just what we're discussing here. Well, if there are no questions, and would like to, before we say goodbye, I'd like to give you two an opportunity to make some closing statements. I want you to know that I find this a very valuable conversation, and I hope that we can engage in conversations as we're moving through what I know will be a better and more respectful and smarter and more righteous administration coming up. So let me start with Manur and then go to you, Nisha.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Congresswoman. I, thank all of you for your continued support on this issue. Solidarity to all of the H-4 EAD recipients who are really experiencing the harms and challenges of what this past few years have brought. I'm, again, as an advocate, looking to President-elect Biden to, secure a solution, a long-term solution for all of our communities. And again, immediately on the first day, auto extending the work authorization permits for H-4 EAD holders. And, again, this sort of alleviation is really necessary. And again, looking forward to really building a humane and just immigration system.
Thank you. Nisha. Nisha?
Yes, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, I first wanted to thank you so much for bringing attention to this issue, to listening. I know that you have a lot of constituents who are really stressed and worried, and I just wanted to thank you for your efforts and the letter. It really helps a lot. I think folks just really want to be heard, and you're listening, and then we can take the next steps. I also wanted to speak to the folks, H-4 holders, who are in this situation. Hang in there. We will get a fix. I trust that in the Biden administration, we will be rolling back to more fair, smart, humane immigration policy. I would also point out that if you are experiencing domestic violence, cruelty in your home, there are actually other humanitarian immigration tools. There is a work permit that is specifically for folks in H-4 and other visa holders who are being abused. It's called the I-765V. I-765V. It allows folks who are in H-4 status and some who were recently in H-4 status to apply for a work permit and protection that is separate from the work permit that we were talking about today. And I would just invite people, if they have questions, to reach out to me, because I have been involved in advocacy and doing pro bono work in this area as well as in my private practice. So just be aware in your communities. Some immigration lawyers don't even know about this relief. So please do look into the I-765V if you know anybody who's in this situation, because as we talked about earlier, there are a lot of issues that have been raised, but if you're in an abusive situation, it makes all these problems exponential. So just be aware that that's there and hang in there. We will be able to address these issues, and I my heart goes out to all of you who are dealing with these issues. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nisha. I tell you, this has been, as I said, a very valuable conversation, and thank you for the information that you just shared with our audience about other options, because we are concerned about issues of domestic violence, not only in our community that's awaiting fairness on the H-4 visas, but on other communities as well. This isolation has really created some real traumatic experiences on our communities. I want to say that both of you, Manor and Anish, you have been tremendous wealth of information that I think is helpful to people. And I want individuals who are experiencing problems right now and need some guidance or need to share with us, please call my office. We will answer. We will send you the information that we have, and we'll be as helpful as we possibly can be. I know this video is going to go out beyond the 12th Congressional District. So I remind you that wherever you live, find out who your member is, your elected member to Congress and the U.S. Senate, and let them hear from you. Because the more they hear from you, the more they realize the urgency with which to address these issues. And so I look forward to that. Now, our local office is 609-883-0026. Please call us anytime. Leave a message if you don't get someone on the phone at the moment, because sometimes we are working virtually because of the pandemic, and know that we will do everything in our power to be helpful. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Tanisha. Thank you to Matnor. Many blessings upon you, your families, and the communities that we strive to serve and have been called to serve. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.